Welcome to our deep dive today, where we're going to unpack the hidden macroeconomic engine that explains why pretty much everything we buy nowadays seems, well, destined to break. If you've ever felt like your pricey gadgets or household appliances just don't hold up like they used to, trust me, you are definitely not alone. But as we're going to see, this isn't just a matter of sloppy engineering or bad luck. It's actually the very core mechanism powering our entire global economy. So let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. What would actually happen to our global economic system if our cars, phones, and washing machines simply lasted forever? I mean, from a consumer's point of view, that sounds like an absolute dream, right? You buy it once, you use that for life. But if we zoom out and look at this strictly from a macroeconomic perspective, a world where things stop breaking is, well, it's basically a guaranteed industry meltdown. To really understand why, we need to look at this incredible historical anomaly, the legendary Mercedes-Benz W123. Built in the 70s and 80s, this thing was a total engineering masterpiece. Quality completely superseded marketing. It had this diesel OM616 engine that was practically immortal. There's even a famous story of a Greek taxi driver who pushed his W123 to a record-breaking 4.6 million kilometers. But here is the paradox. By building a true forever product, Mercedes-Benz almost shot themselves in the foot. They were effectively destroying their own future sales pipeline. Contrast that with modern vehicles. They're incredibly complex, have way shorter life cycles, and are heavily optimized for cost rather than infinite durability. Let's break down the basic math here using a really simple analogy. Imagine you're a roofer, okay? You've got a total monopoly in a tiny town of exactly 75 houses. Every year, you do a perfect job fixing 15 roofs using totally indestructible materials. They will never, ever break again. Well, the math is brutal. In exactly 5 years, you've repaired every single roof in town. Your market is 100% saturated, and boom, your business is completely dead. You have to pack up and leave. To survive, you almost have to start using cheaper materials that actually need replacing every few years just to balance the market. And that is the exact paradox global manufacturers are facing today. And honestly, this perfectly illustrates a macroeconomic reality that's been around for a century. Back in 1924 in Geneva, the biggest electrical companies in the world got together and formed the Phoebus Cartel. Why? Because their light bulbs were just too good. They were lasting up to 2,500 hours, which meant people simply stopped buying replacements. The market got crowded and profits tanked. So they gave their engineers a seriously counterintuitive task: make the product deliberately worse. The cartel strictly capped light bulb lifespans at 1,000 hours, and they even hit manufacturers with heavy fines if they exceeded it. By standardizing that shorter lifespan, they guaranteed repeat sales and literally saved their industry. So the crucial point here is this inescapable economic equation. If everything lasts a lifetime, we get zero breakdowns. Zero breakdowns immediately equals fewer repeat purchases. And without repeat customers, production factories slow down, the conveyor belts grind to a halt, and ultimately you're looking at severe sector unemployment. This isn't just about big corporate profits drying up. It's about the very workforce that relies on those factories to survive. Creating a true forever product mathematically guarantees an industry crash and massive job losses. To prevent that economic stall, and to keep that constant flow of capital moving for research and development, modern producers rely on 3 distinct mechanisms. I like to call them the 3 horsemen of obsolescence. They are what keep the consumer cycle spinning: technical obsolescence, software obsolescence, and psychological obsolescence. Let's actually dive into how each of these hidden macroeconomic engines functions out there in the real world. All right, our first horseman is technical obsolescence. This basically operates on the principle of the weak link. It's when manufacturers intentionally use cheaper, less durable materials. Think of putting flimsy plastic gears inside a super expensive espresso machine, or using glued-in unremovable batteries in smartphones that you just know will degrade in a couple of years. And they take it even further with artificial repair limitations. Manufacturers will literally digitally pair internal parts to a device's main board. So even if a tiny, simple part breaks, it can only be fixed by a highly expensive official service center. They're practically forcing you to just throw your hands up and buy a brand new device instead of repairing it. Now, what's truly mind-blowing is the extreme lengths producers will go to take away your right to repair. We saw this perfectly play out with the agricultural giant John Deere. They completely locked down their tractor's software. This meant if a farmer replaced a cheap basic part out in the field, the tractor's engine would digitally lock itself down until an expensive official dealer drove out with a special laptop. The absurdity reached a point where American farmers were literally turning to the darknet to buy hacked firmware just to harvest their crops. Wild, right? Thankfully, this sparked a massive farmer rebellion, leading to collective lawsuits, and in 2023, the company finally caved, restoring the right to repair and proving that corporate overreach can actually be checked. Moving on to our second horseman, software obsolescence. This one is a brilliant, totally invisible force of digital degradation. Let's say you've got a perfectly fine 5-year-old smartphone, not a single scratch on it. But suddenly, it gets hit with these huge, bloated operating system updates that just choke the processor. Suddenly, it's unbearably slow. Or maybe the manufacturer simply cuts off support. Crucial things like your banking apps or secure messengers just stop working because your old OS doesn't support the latest security encryption anymore. For so many consumers, this is the final, frustrating push to buy new hardware, even when the physical device itself is completely perfectly fine. But, legislation is finally starting to catch up. For instance, the EU is mandating replaceable device batteries by 2027. So, because outright planned obsolescence is becoming a bit of a legal minefield, manufacturers are shifting gears to a new macroeconomic strategy called imposed service. They are literally trying to charge you monthly software subscriptions for physical hardware that is already installed in your car. Remember when BMW faced that massive backlash in 2023 for trying to charge a subscription just to turn on the heated seats the car was already built with? Mercedes did it too, offering a paid subscription to unlock the full steering angle on their electric models. The physical capability is sitting right there, but the functionality is locked behind a digital paywall. And finally, we have the third horseman, psychological obsolescence. And honestly, this one is an absolute masterclass in marketing hypnosis. It doesn't rely on broken parts or sluggish software. It targets our minds. It's that subtle design trigger that makes an older phone with slightly thicker screen bezels or last year's color feel somehow socially embarrassing. Marketing campaigns are designed to convince us that without the absolute newest feature, a feature we'll probably only use twice a year anyway, our lives are incomplete and our peers will judge us. It creates this powerful, entirely manufactured shame over owning perfectly functional things. Now, it's super easy to look at all of this and point the finger entirely at corporate greed. But before we just blame the manufacturers for this endless cycle, we need to flip the mirror and ask a much more uncomfortable question. Why do we voluntarily keep buying new things when our old stuff works perfectly well? Because the hard truth is, this massive machine of planned obsolescence only functions because we, the consumers, enthusiastically agree to play along. Just think about the sheer absurdity of our consumption habits for a second. The processing power sitting in your pocket right now, your smartphone, vastly dwarfs the room-sized computers that literally steered humanity to the moon during the Apollo missions. I mean, it is exponentially more powerful than the machines that used to run entire industrial factories. And yet, what do we primarily use this incredible supercomputer for? Sending basic text messages, scrolling through photos, and watching short videos. We could easily do all of that on far older, much simpler devices, but we still relentlessly line up for the newest model every single year. From a purely economic standpoint, our behavior as buyers is fundamentally irrational. First off, there's status signaling. A brand new device tells our peers we're successful. Then there's the hunt for fast dopamine. The simple act of unboxing has morphed into a massive cultural phenomenon. We just crave that brief, fleeting thrill of the new. We also fall victim to herd mentality, basically buying what everyone else buys without ever actually checking the specs. And finally, there's ecosystem lock-in. We buy one product, get entirely trapped in its proprietary software and accessories, and suddenly brand loyalty isn't even a choice anymore. It's just an expensive necessity. And that brings us to a really fascinating contradiction, the massive gap between our words and our actions. In surveys and online reviews, we are super loud about demanding robust durability. We constantly complain about fragile screens and batteries that die way too fast. We say we want lifelong repairability. But what do our wallets actually say? Sales data overwhelmingly proves that when standing right there in the store, we will consistently choose a device with a slightly thinner frame or some trendy new seasonal color over a slightly bulkier device with a massive battery and a rugged build. And guess what? Manufacturers know this. They're simply delivering exactly what we pay for rather than what we complain about. So this reveals a rather harsh but undeniable truth about modern macroeconomics. Planned obsolescence is essentially the artificial maintenance of demand and economic growth. Today, it's not some shadowy conspiracy hatched in a smoke-filled room, though, to be fair, as we saw with the Phoebus Cartel, those did historically exist. But today, it's just an open, mutually agreed-upon business model. It's a dry, calculated financial strategy. The rapid transformation of natural resources into discarded tech is quite literally the fuel keeping our current global economic growth engine running.
But we have to look at the crucial flip side of this coin, which we can think of as the hidden tax on progress. Let's loop back to that indestructible Mercedes W123. If every car manufacturer just kept building vehicles that never ever broke, they would have never generated the continuous flow of capital required for immense research and development. Without that constant river of revenue from repeat buyers, the auto industry wouldn't have had the funds to invent and perfect life-saving technologies like anti-lock braking systems, electronic stability programs, or modern airbags. Our endless cycle of consumption is the massive financial engine that pushes these technological leaps forward.
So knowing that this rapid cycle of consumption and breakdown is effectively the hidden tax we voluntarily pay to fund human progress, it completely reframes how we look at our gadgets and our economy as a whole. It demands a different logic from businesses and from us as buyers. I want to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. Where in your own life do you purposefully hold on to the old and save your cash? And where do you catch yourself upgrading unnecessarily, buying the new purely for that dopamine thrill, even when your old stuff is still perfectly functional? Think about that for a bit. Thank you so much for joining me for our analysis today. Keep questioning the systems around you, and I'll catch you next time.